Chapter 24 Heinie Groh. Strange that some great sculptor has not seized upon little Heinie Groh as the inspiration for a wondrous modeling. There have been statues, some almost classic in their perfection, showing ball players in action, but the famous third baseman and captain of the Cincinnati Reds would give a matchless verve and breathless interest as to the concept. A tiny man, yet faultless as the Pythian Apollo, a small figure bent half forward like a crouching runner waiting for the starter's gun, an eager face, with glowing eyes and parted lips, the hand swinging free, waiting for an instantaneous demands. The bat crashes, a spurt of dust as the little man goes to the ground, and one steel muscle diving leap up again, ball firm gripped against the black and battered glove, arms cooked, shoulders swings forward, and the thud of the ball spatting into the first baseman's glove. That is Heinie Groh. Editorial in the Cincinnati Times-Star, 1919. There was a period of about 15 years where it seemed like if anything real big had happened, I was right on the spot. Like a guardian angel, you might say, or a lead nickel maybe. Take your choice. Like when Fred Snodgrass muffed the fly ball in the World Series in 1912, when Fred Tony and Jim Vaughn were both pitched no-hitters in the same game in 1917, when the Black Sox threw the World Series in 1919, when that ball hit a pebble around and bounced over Fred Lindstrom's head in the World Series in 1924, you name it. And I was there. Some writer once called me the ambiguous Mr. Groh, because it seemed like regardless of what was going on or where, I'd be somewhere around the premises. Or it was the ubiquitous Mr. Groh. I don't remember, but you get the idea. Take that double no-hitter, for instance. It happened in Chicago in 1917. I was leading off and playing third base for Cincinnati that day. Both Fred Tony and Jim Vaughn pitched 9 no-hit innings, and at the end of the ninth, the score was still tied up at 0. Not a single person on either team had gotten a hit. Amazingly, actually, Vaughn had walked me twice, and so I was on first base a couple of times during the game. But each time the next man hit and hit it into a double play. Do you know who won that game for us in the 10th inning? It was Big Jim Thorpe, the great Indian athlete. He was playing right field for us that day. Larry Cope was our shortstop, got the first hit of the game, a single to right field in the 10th inning. Then we went into the third. He went to third when Al Chase hit at a line drive that the center dropped. Then with 2 out, Jim Thorpe got the second hit of the game, a dinky infield single that the pitcher couldn't handle, and Larry scored on it. Fred Tony, he kept the Cubs hitless in the last half of the 10th, and so we won 1-0. I don't think that's ever happened before or since, both pitchers in a game pitching no-hitter. So it's a big thing when you look back at it. But that day, when it happened, most of us didn't realize what was going on until it was all over. In a game where the score is 0-0, everybody gets to tense worrying about their own jobs that they don't have time to keep checking on does the pitcher or have a no-hitter going or not. We have our own problems to worry about. That was the way it was with me anyway. I had enough to do at first base to keep me busy, so I didn't realize what had happened until after the game had ended. And when I thought that, well, that's interesting, and that was that. Now through, it's a big thing. And Lindstrom in that 1924 World Series, we should have won that one. The 7th game of the series and all, and not once but twice, the ball hits a pebble and bounces over his head. I guess the good Lord just didn't want to see us to win that game, and that's all there was to it. By the time, you see, I was back on the New York Giants, where I started out in 1912. Well, of course, I didn't really start out with them. I mean, is that at the Giants, which were the first club I played with in the big leagues, I actually began in Oshkosh, which was in the Wisconsin-Illinois League. I've been there before. It's a nice town. That was back in 1908 when I was only 18 years old. I was planning to start at the University of Rochester that year, but one day a fellow from the Oshkosh Club came along and asked me if I would like to play ball with them. Well, I believe I will, I said. We didn't have much money, and this looked like a good way to pay my own way for a change. My father and mother didn't think too much of the idea, but they didn't try to stop me. Dad said, "Let him go. He'll be back." But I didn't come back. I stayed the whole season with Oshkosh, and in fact, I played 3 full years there. I was a shortstop in those days, and I've got to admit that if it hadn't been for my fielding, I'd have been back in Rochester before they'd even known I was gone. I don't think I know. I hit 161 that first season, which didn't exactly lead the league, but I kept practicing and fielding and practicing at it. And the next year I hit about 285. The next year after that I hit about 300. That was in 1910, and in 1911, after 3 years with Oshkosh, the New York Giants bought me and farmed me out to Buffalo in the Eastern League. I did pretty well there, so in 1912, McGraw brought me up the big city. That's how come I was there in 1912 when Snodgrass dropped that fly ball and the Red Sox beat us in that series. I never got into any of those games, but I was a Giant that season, hitting on the bench most of the time. They had a crackerjack infield, with Fred Merkle, Larry Doyle, Art Fletcher, and Buck Herzog. And I just couldn't break into that lineup to save my life. The next year, though, McGraw traded me to the Cincinnati Reds, and that's where I started playing regular in 1913. I was a second baseman for the first few seasons I was with the Reds. Then they made me into a third baseman, and we had a darn good club those years in Cincinnati. During the teens and early 20s, Hal Chase and then Jack Daubert at first base, Maury Roth at second, Larry Cope at short, myself at third, and then in the outfield we had Eddie Rauch, Grace E. Neal, Rube Bressler, and Pat Duncan, with Ivy Wingo catching and a whole slew of terrific pitchers like Epha Ejeptha, Rixey, Dutch Ruther, Dolph LeCue, Slim Sally, Jimmy Ring, and Hod Eller. Old Hod had what he called a shine ball. What it was, he had a file in his belt, and every once in a while he'd rub the ball against the file. That was a good team, a real good team, and I still don't see why the White Sox were supposed to be such favorites to beat us in the 1919 World Series. I know how good Joe Jackson and Happy Felsch were in the outfield, but they weren't any better than Eddie Rauch. Why, Eddie used to take care of the whole outfield, not just center field. He was far and away the best outfielder I ever saw, and our pitching was just as good as theirs for sure. Well, maybe the White Sox did throw it. I don't know. Maybe they did it and maybe they didn't. It's hard to say. I didn't see anything that looked suspicious, but I think we'd have beaten them either way. That's what I thought then, and I still think so today. I played with the Reds from 1913 to 1921, and then they traded me back to the Giants, and I stayed there until 1926. So that's how come I played in so many World Series, 1919 with the Reds, and then every year from 1922, 23, and 24 with the Giants, and then 1927, my last year in the big leagues, I caught out on with the Pittsburgh Pirates and got the series with them. So between 1919 and 1927, I played in 5 World Series with 3 different clubs. And if you count 1912, I was in 6 World Series altogether. I figure that's probably a record for anybody who never played with the Yankees. You know how they're so record happy these days. Most errors by a left-handed right fielder on Saturdays where the date is an odd number and all that. Well, there's one record I hold. Most World Series on the most different teams for a right-handed third baseman who didn't switch hit and never played for the Yankees. If I didn't add that switch hitting in there, I think maybe my old roommate Frankie Frisch would take the cake. As a matter of fact, though, I think I still do hold the record for the highest season's fielding average for a third baseman. I got that because I have a strong chest. I'd get in front of that ball one way or the other, and if I couldn't catch it, I'd let it hit me. And then I'd grab it on the bounce and throw it to first. McGraw's the one who taught me that when I first came up. Gee, get in front of those balls, he said. You won't get hurt. That's what you've got a chest for, young man. McGraw's also the one who started me using my bottle bat. When I came up, he didn't like that bat I had, but he told me to try to get one with a large barrel. But the large barreled bats and large handles were in my hands were too small to grip the bat like they very well. See, I'm not too big. I'm 5'7" and weigh only about 160 pounds. That isn't real small, but it's not real big either. So I went to Spalding's in New York, and we went down in the basement, and right there we whittled on a bat until it was just what I needed. What I wanted was a bat with a big butt end, but with a skinny handle so I could get a good grip up and swing it. We whittled down the handle of a standard bat, and then we built up the barrel, and when we were finished, it looked like a crazy sort of milk bottle or a round paddle, real wide at one end, and then suddenly tapering real quick to a thin handle. The handle part had to be longer than on most bats, because I choked up quite a bit and kept my ends a little apart too. But I wanted it big, starting right above my hands, so if I hit an inside pitch near my hands, it would have some power. That bat weighed about 46 ounces, and all that weight was in the barrel where it counted. You couldn't hold that bottle bat down at the knob end, because the way the weight was distributed, the ball would knock it right out of your hands. But I always choked up and chopped up that ball. I didn't swing from the heels. I chop at the ball and drive it over the infield. See? I had a good luck with that bat, stuck with it from 1912 on and never changed. And for a guy who hit 166, his first season at Oshkosh, you see what it did. I had a lifetime average of over 290 for all the while I was in the big leagues. And one period there, from 1917 through 1921, I hit about 315. And then the 1922 World Series, when we beat the Yankees 4 straight, I hit 474. I still carry 474 as my license plate on my car. Have every single year since 1922. As a matter of fact, I had the Yankees signs in the 1922 World Series, not their pitching signs, their hitting signs. I knew when they were going to bunt and when they were trying to go for a hit, which is something it's very nice for a third baseman to know. I figured them out in the very first game from what Miller Huggins was doing and had them in the whole series. That was also the series where Babe Ruth crashed into me at third base and almost started a real Donnybrook. Whew. The Babe wasn't doing very well. I think he only got 2 hits in the whole series. And the Yankees were getting beat, and I was hitting like nobody's business. So in the third game, the Babe got on base, and that's when the next man up singled. Babe came tearing around into third, and as he came in, he gave me the shoulder and sent me flying. I didn't complain. That's baseball for you. But the fans really got on him and gave him a terrific going over. When I finally got on my feet, the Babe said to me, "Kid, we're both entitled to part of that base path." "Okay," I said. "You take your side, and I'll take mine. And if I ever find you on my side, you better watch out." Oh, I couldn't have budged that big guy if I'd have hit him with the locomotive, and he knew it too. But you got to let him know who's boss, right? Babe Ruth was a nice guy, though there's no doubt about that. I never held it against him. A ball player can't carry a grudge off the field. Well, anyway, never as soon as that gate's closed out there, it's all over. You just forget it. Tomorrow's another day. You can't take the game home with you every night, or you'll go crazy before the season's half over. So much of baseball is mental, Up there in the old head, you always have to be careful not to let it get at you. Did you know that I was scared to death every time I went to a World Series? Every single one, even if after I had been in so many. It's a terrific strain, but once I'd fielded that first ball, it was just another ball game. Well, almost. Not quite, of course. People used to ask me before a World Series started, "Well, how did you feel?" "I'll let you know after I handled the first at bat," I'd say. "If you handle that first ball clean, then you relax. It's worse than you mess. You mess up that first one, that things go from bad to worse. You start worrying, and once you do that, you've had it." Didn't I tell you about Freddie Lindstrom's tough luck in the 1924 World Series? Yeah, I thought I did. That was McGraw's 4th pennant in a row, and as it turned out, it'd be his last. He was a fine man, Mr. McGraw was. I really liked him. I thought the Giants' regular third baseman, myself, that I was the Giants' third baseman that year, but late in the season, I tore my knee and couldn't play, so Freddie Lundstorm, who was only 18 years old then, was put in. The series was tied at 3 games apiece, and in the 7th game, we were ahead 3-1 in the 8th inning. The Senators loaded the bases with 2 out. That's who we were playing, the Washington Senators. Bucky Harris slammed a sharp grounder to third, and just as Freddie was about to field it, it took a wicked hop right over his head, and 2 runs scored, to tie the game. Then in the 12th inning, the exact same thing happened. A grounder to third hit a pebble again, bounced way over the kid's head. We lost the game and in the series 4-3. It wasn't Freddie's fault. It could have happened to anybody. He never had a chance to get the ball. It was fate, that's all. Fate and a pebble. I stayed with the Giants 2 more years, but I didn't play very much after 1924 because my knee never got well again. And then they let me go after 1926. I was 37 then. You don't play very much third base at that age anyway. I was lucky though, and good old Donnie Bush picked me up as a utility infielder for the Pirates in 1927, so I got to see another World Series for free when the Pirates won the pennant that year. That was the first year both Wayner boys were in the outfield for Pittsburgh, and it sure was a delight to watch those 2 baseball criminy sakes. Could they ever hit? No bloopers either, all line drives, both of them fast as antelopes. That was my last season. I knew it would be, so I just sat back on the bench and watched the Wayners go to it. Boy, that's the way for an old guy to pass the time of day, watching 2 beautiful ball players like Paul and Lloyd starting out on what you just know are going to be real great careers. That was such a treat. I actually enjoyed that last season just as much as I did my first, maybe even more.